Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into a single event that ignited a fire across an entire continent, an event that many historians argue was the true beginning of World War II in Asia. We're talking about the Mukden Incident, also known as the 9.9918 Incident. So grab your notebooks, get comfortable, and let's explore how a small, staged explosion on a railway track led to the invasion of a territory larger than France and Germany combined. To understand what happened, we need to set the scene. The year is 1931. The location is Manchuria, a vast and resource-rich region in northeast China. For decades, foreign powers, particularly Japan and Russia, had vied for influence here. Following the Russo-Japanese War in the early 1900s, Japan gained significant control, including ownership of the South Manchuria Railway, a vital artery for transporting resources. Stationed to protect these interests was a formidable Japanese military force known as the Kwantung Army. Now, the 1920s and early 30s were a turbulent time in Japan. The Great Depression had hit hard, and a rising tide of militarism and ultranationalism was sweeping the country. Military leaders, especially those in the Kwantung Army, believed that expanding Japan's empire was the only way to secure resources and cement its status as a world power. They saw Manchuria, with its coal, iron, and vast open spaces, as the perfect prize. But they needed a reason, a justification to take it by force. Since they didn't have one, they decided to create one. This brings us to the night of September 18th, 1931. Near the city of Mukden, now known as Shenyang, a group of Kwantung Army officers secretly planted a small amount of dynamite next to the tracks of the South Manchuria Railway. The explosion was tiny. In fact, it was so insignificant that a train passed over that very section of track just a few minutes later without any issue. But the size of the blast didn't matter. What mattered was the story that would be told about it. Immediately, without any investigation, the Japanese military machine roared to life. They broadcasted to the world that Chinese soldiers had sabotaged the railway, a blatant attack on Japanese property and sovereignty. This was the pretext they had been waiting for. It was a complete fabrication, a classic false flag operation designed from the start to justify a full-scale invasion. Using this manufactured excuse, the Kwantung Army launched a coordinated assault on the nearby Chinese barracks at Beidaying. The Chinese forces in the region, known as the Northeast Army, were commanded by Zhang Zuiliang, the young marshal. He was in a difficult position. His army was large, but not as well equipped or trained as the Japanese. More importantly, the central government of China, led by Chiang Kai-shek, was focused on internal conflicts and hoped for international diplomacy to resolve the issue. As a result, Zhang Zuiliang issued a fateful order: do not resist. The policy of non-resistance was intended to prevent the small, localized incident from escalating into a full-blown war. The Chinese leadership put their faith in the international community, particularly the League of Nations, to step in, condemn Japan, and force a withdrawal. They believed that by showing restraint, they could expose Japan as the aggressor on the world stage. This turned out to be a catastrophic miscalculation. The Kwantung Army, facing little to no opposition, advanced with shocking speed. They weren't just securing the railway, they were seizing entire cities. Mukden fell within hours. The non-resistance policy, meant to de-escalate, instead gave the invaders a green light. The Japanese forces, which were supposed to be merely protecting their interests, systematically occupied key strategic points across Manchuria. Imagine the chaos and confusion for the Chinese soldiers and civilians. They watched as a foreign army marched into their cities, taking control of government buildings, banks, and infrastructure, all while their own troops were ordered to stand down. The hope for international intervention quickly faded as the Japanese conquest rolled on. Within just 4 months, the whole of Manchuria, a region of immense strategic and economic importance, had fallen under Japanese control. The speed and success of the operation shocked the world, but the response was frustratingly slow and ineffective. So, Japan now controlled this massive territory. What did they do with it? They couldn't just annex it outright, as that would be too blatant an act of aggression. Instead, they pursued a more insidious strategy. In 1932, they declared the independence of Manchuria and established a new nation, Manchukuo. This was a puppet state in every sense of the word. While it had its own flag, currency, and government, all real power was held by Japanese military advisors and officials. To give Njihoff new state a veneer of legitimacy, they needed a figurehead, a leader with a connection to the region's history. They found the perfect candidate in a man living in quiet exile, Puyi, the last emperor of China's Qing dynasty, which was originally of Manchu origin. The Japanese installed him as the chief executive and later the emperor of Manchukuo. For Puyi, it was a chance to reclaim a throne, but in reality he was a prisoner in his own palace, a pawn in Japan's imperial games. Manchukuo became a giant economic engine for the Japanese war machine. its resources stripped and its people exploited to fuel Japan's ambitions. Now, what about the League of Nations, the international body that China had placed its hopes in? The League did respond. It sent a commission, led by Lord Lytton of Britain, to investigate. The Lytton Report, published a year later in 1932, was thorough and clear. It concluded that the Mukden Incident was staged by the Japanese and that Manchukuo was not a genuinely independent state. It condemned Japan's actions, calling them a violation of international law. The world was watching. This was a major test for the League of Nations, its first real challenge from a major power. How would Japan react to this international condemnation? Their response was one of complete defiance. In March 1933, the Japanese delegation dramatically walked out of the League of Nations Assembly, formally withdrawing from the organization. This act sent a chilling message to the world. Japan would not be bound by international law or collective security. It showed that the League of Nations was ultimately powerless to stop a determined aggressor. This failure would embolden other expansionist powers like Mussolini's Italy and Hitler's Germany in the years to come. The long-term consequences of the Mukden Incident were profound and tragic. It's not an exaggeration to say it set the stage for the wider conflict that would engulf the globe. For China, it marked the beginning of a brutal 14-year-long struggle against Japanese invasion, a period of immense suffering and loss that we now recognize as the Second Sino-Japanese War. For the world, it demonstrated the failure of diplomacy and collective security in the face of military aggression. The unopposed conquest of Manchuria was a green light for militaristic regimes everywhere. It was the first domino to fall in a chain reaction that would lead directly to the outbreak of World War II in Europe a few years later. That's why many historians now look back at that small staged explosion on September 18, 1931, not just as a regional conflict, but as the true opening act of the Second World War. It's a powerful reminder of how a seemingly small event, born from ambition and deception, can have world-altering consequences. Understanding the Mukden Incident is crucial to understanding the path that led to the most destructive war in human history. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into a pivotal moment in history. If you found this video informative, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next exploration. What other historical events would you like to see covered? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.